everyone, it's Daphne from Scrap and Create, and we are working on the cover of Arctic Antarctica, or Arctic Antarctic. I keep saying it wrong. We've got an 8.5 by 8.5 album that we're going to cover, and I'm going to show you what I did. I decided to use this page. I'm going to try to feature each one of the large elements. So the penguin, the bear, I've lost my train of thought, the wolves, in different pages throughout the book, and I'm going to use the penguin for the cover. So I looked at the 8 by 8, and it really wasn't quite the scale I wanted. I wanted a stronger statement, so I'm going to use the 12 by 12, and I'm going to trim it down to fit. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim off the excess on the bottom. I might use these cut apart someplace else, but not on the bottom. And then I trimmed off the side here, and I'm going to show you what I did. So basically, on the second, I used 2 packs. What I did was trim off this side, trim off the bottom, and then I came across 8.5, I think it's 8.5 inches. Yeah. So once I had trimmed this side off, then I came across and trimmed this as an entire unit at 8.5. So now it's 8.5 inches wide, but it's still too large to fit on the cover. I need to shrink it down. So I followed the landscape line, and what I'm going to do is just scoot this image up and then adhere this again so that it's an 8.5 by 8.5, so it'll fit on the cover. It's actually going to be 8 3/8 by 8 3/8. So that's where we're at. That's how I've done this. I like that I was able to ink the edges of the range here because I just think it makes it stand out more. It's bold. So now I'm going to attach these 2 pieces, and then I'm going to lay it on the cover and trim it to where I need it to fit. So for right now, I'm using my grid. I just wanted to check and see if you could see what I was doing. Using my grid to figure out where my 8.5 inch mark is, and it's right there. Okay, so I am going to use my grid, lay that in place, and I'm going to add some glue to it. And we're going to join these 2 pieces. Okay. You could do it with tape if you want to as well. I'm using glue because I want it to slide around a little bit until I'm happy with its placement. Here's my 8.5 inch line all the way. Good grief, my nails are just popping off all over the place. It's the weather. Okay, now that this is adhered, I'm gonna let that dry for a second. I'm going to place this in the trimmer and trim down this side so it's nice and smooth, and that we have the nice border that I like to have on the cover. So let that dry. I'm actually going to add a little bit more glue right there so it doesn't get caught in the trimmer. And then that's what it's going to look like. It looks like I need to add some glue up here too. Probably the best thing would have been to put the glue on this piece instead of this piece. And then I wouldn't have these pieces hanging off like so. But easy enough to go back and add it where you need it. Okay, now I'm going to trim it down to 8 3/4 by 8 3/4. Sorry, 8 3/8 by 8 3/8. Okay, so that should be just about right. I'm going to look at it real quick, and then if it looks good, I'm going to ink it and lay it down. And it does look good. All right. Cool. So let's add some ink and lay it down. And this will become the main part of the cover. And then to continue the pattern, I'm using this landscape because I think it's just going to look beautiful wrapped around the back side. So you can see it's very similar. It's actually this image, but on a larger scale. But for now, let's get the cover on. Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to take a break. I just remembered. I'm going to use some bookbinding tape on my spine. I haven't done that yet, so I'm going to take a break and do that. There is a tutorial under tips and techniques on how to use bookbinding tape on your albums over the main spines coming off the hinge coming off the spine. I said that backwards. So I'm going to take a break and go get my tape and get that done, and then we'll lay on the cover. Be back soon. Okay, I'm back. I've got my bookbinding tape on here, so you can see, and so I've wrapped it all the way around. It's on the inside as well. And now, and you see the seam here. The seam is here because I used 3 pieces of 8.5 by 11 to cover, and so that's why I have a seam here. But I'm not really worried about it because we are going to cover it with this. And you'll still be able to see a little bit, but not much. Okay, I think we're ready for some glue. And then you can see where it's pieced together back here. Now I'm using glue because it is just a stationary mat. Whenever there's an interactive component, I like to use the tape because it remains flexible over time. But on stationary mats, glue is fine. Okay. Okay. Because I don't have my pages installed, I can lay it down flat and burnish it. And I got a bubble in my tape. Now that's gone. Okay. So we're making some progress. That's going to be so pretty. So I'm going to add some additional embellishments. And because I'm using 2 packs, I've got another image exactly like this. And I actually might fussy cut this out and pop this element. I haven't decided yet. It'll depend on whether or not I need to repurpose that for anything else in the book, because the rest of my pages aren't designed. I'm not sure if I'm going to need that paper. So I'm not going to cut into that second 12 by 12 until I finish the rest of my pages. Okay, so now I told you that I chose this, and it's going to wrap around to the back. And I haven't decided how I'm going to do this. I don't know if I want a strip on the spine or if I just want to wrap from here around. So I'm thinking about that right now. And I think I'm going to cut a strip off. So I'm going to have this in the back. So I'm going to trim this down to 8.5 right now. Actually, I trimmed it to 8 3/8. Yeah. And then I'm going to take off a little bit off the top. Okay. So now this is 8 3/8 by 8 3/8, and this, we're going to put it on the back. Just make sure I've got my right side up. Go ahead and ink it. Hope everybody's doing well. We're having a beautiful sunny day here in San Diego, And a couple of days it was raining like cats and dogs. So it's been kind of some interesting weather. I like it when it's rainy. It really makes you feel like the holidays are approaching. All right. Okay. Again, I'm going to double check that I've got the right orientation. And this is going to go here. And I think I'm going to use one of my chipboard pieces on the back. I think I might use the polar bear in the back, but I haven't decided. One of the reasons I decided to do my cover out of order, because normally by now I would have my pages in, is the last album I did, I actually forgot to set aside 12 by 12s to do the cover and the inside liners. And so by doing this, changing the order and doing this ahead of time, I know I've still got 12 by 12s I can work with. I don't know why that was, but it happens once in a while. Usually the first thing I do is set aside the covers and the liners so I don't accidentally cut through them and then not have paper that's big enough to cover. You can always do blocking, which is how I solved my problem, but it just wasn't what the plan was. It was more a reaction to what was left. Okay, so now I trimmed that down, so this is what remains. So I want it to look as though it's wrapping around, so I'm going to trim this side off. And it needs to be, let me double check, 2.5. Let's see how it looks. It's possible I may need to trim it a little more. I think it's going to be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and ink it. And we'll lay it down. And then that's our cover. And I'll take a quick break, line up the liners. When we get back, we'll do the insides of the covers. I had a bubble in the tape again, so just burnish it down. It's much easier to do before I put the paper on it. Got a little extra glue there. It's so, I love white. I think it's beautiful, but it's very hard to work with in terms of trying to keep it clean. So this is a good time to take a break because I probably need to go wash my hands. Otherwise, I'll be dragging glue and whatever else I pick up off the desktop onto my white trim. So that is the cover, the spine, and the back. Lovely, lovely. Okay, I'll be back soon. Hey everyone, it's Daphne from Scrap and Crate, and we are working on Arctic Antarctic, and we are focused right now on, sorry, I'm picking up some stuff on the floor, focused on the inside liners of the cover. So I am using 12 by 12 collection pack pieces, and I'm going to do some color blocking. And you guys may notice that I do this all the time, and here's why. I am huge on symmetry. It must be the process engineer in me, or I don't know, but I like symmetry. So I like there to be balance between the front and back, even though when the pages are open, you can't see them completely. And because no, that doesn't really make sense. one of the ways I can do that, especially if you're only using one pack of 12 by 12, is because you need a 12 by 12 for the front and the back, because the 8 by 8 is going to not be scaled right. And one of the ways you can do that is by cutting that 12 by 12 in half and putting half on each side. Now, in the case of this album, I did use 2 packs of 12 by 12, so I could have duplicated that image on the front and back, but then I wouldn't have been able to use it anywhere else in the book. And by doing this, I can preserve a 6 by 12 strip to use somewhere else inside the book, or use one 12 by 12 to split between the front and back. So that's kind of the thought process I have with this. And one of the things that's kind of missing in this collection, it's a very organic patterns, as you can see, is I don't really have anything that's either a stripe or sort of a consistent pattern to split these two. So right now I'm sort of looking around to see what I can do to run a decorative strip between the two. And I'm not sure I'm going to find anything I like. And so I am going to show you how to solve that problem if you don't have a strip. So one of the things I think I might do, and I've not done this before, at least not on camera, is I don't have a liner here. I used to line these and I stopped doing that because I cover them up. But if it was lined, then I would be able to have that nice thin strip of white between these two patterns. So there's another way to accomplish that without lining this, and that would be to cut a strip, and I'm just going to make it an inch. A 1-inch strip, and then adhere this to this piece, and then adhere it to this piece, like so. And then once we get, you know, the gap that we're looking for, if we want it nice and tight or a nice bold strip in between, then I would adhere these two things. Then I would place this whole thing in the trimmer as a unit and trim it down to fit the inside cover. And so I think that is what I'm going to do. And I noticed as I was laying these in that these pieces are not inked. So I am going to ink the edge that goes next to the white paper, and I'm not going to bother to ink around the edges until I get it trimmed to fit. Hopefully that makes sense. So the edges that are going to be adhered on the white paper, I'm going to ink right now. Okay, now the other way to do this is just put a large white mat right here. But I don't feel like I need to do that, so we're going to do this instead. Okay, and of course, whenever I flip anything over, I have to rethink my design decision, but this is what I'm going to go with. So I'm just going to add a bead of glue right here, and then we're going to add this strip. It doesn't even have to be perfectly straight because I know for a fact it's going to get trimmed. Okay, there's our white strip. Now I can add this. I'm going to put a bead here, do the same thing. And then just decide how much do I want exposed. And I like that. That looks pretty good. It looks like about 1/8 of an inch, if you guys want to know. Okay? So that makes that flow nice and smooth. Okay? I went back and forth about whether having dark on top or bottom, and I came up with this because sand is on the bottom and then there's water on top of the sand. So I'm going to make the lighter color on the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to cut another 1-inch strip, and we're going to duplicate that process. Okay, we'll lay in our 1-inch strip side to side. And you can see it's not perfectly straight, but it doesn't matter because we're covering it up, and the only thing that's going to show is about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, Now we've got these two sheets, so I'm going to trim them down. And my album cover is 8.5 by 8.5, so I'm going to trim these down to 8 3/8 by 8 3/8. Okay, now because I've stretched these apart, I went ahead and took a sliver off each side to make sure that this is very flush. If you install it flush, you only have to trim off one side. Now, it was 8 5/8 inches tall, and rather than take a little bit off both sides, I took all the weight off the top. Because this is dark on top, I feel like it's easier to give up some of this pattern than this pattern from a visual weight perspective. So now the overall trim down size is 8 3/8 by 8 3/8. So again, I'm going to trim a sliver off left and right, and then the balance is going to come off the top. But we're done with this one, so let's go ahead and glue it down. And I'm going to open my book and make sure that it was in the right orientation, so I don't glue it in upside down. Okay, and I want the dark toward the top. It's really just a personal preference. See, and that looks lovely. So there's another way to pull your two sheets together, even if you don't have like a nice contrasting band to put in there. So it's also, it's a technique that you can use if you're uncomfortable color blocking directly on the pocket page. Do your color blocking offline and then add it to the page. And all you have to do is just use this 1-inch strip, pretty much like a piece of tape holding the whole thing together. Okay, I just realized that I did not ink this, and since I didn't ink that one, I'm not going to ink this one. That was a mistake. I should have inked around the whole edge, but I didn't. So we're not going to stress. We're just going to make them the same. Okay, again, the blue on top. Don't think I got enough glue on this edge, so lift that up and reapply. There we go. More better. I'm pressing hard because I just want to spread the glue out. Okay, that's that. Yay! Let's go ahead and get our pages in. Okay, so here we are with page 1. I'm going to flip through them to make sure I've got them in the right order. Page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, page 6, and page 7, and of course, lastly, page 8. So they are in order. Set these out of the way. Okay, I like to stand up and see what I'm doing because you are trying to center it left to right or up and down. So I'm looking for even borders on the top and bottom. think my tape tore. Yeah, there's a little tag left in there. Okay, that's done. There we go, moving right along. Okay, and there's our ship. Okay, that's shifted on me, so before I pull my tape all the way off, okay, moving right along. Sorry about that. I had to stop and help my son for a second. Oh, I tore it. I hate it when that happens. It's always good to have a pair of tweezers if you need to dig in there and pull your tape out. Okay. And then we're going to get the backing off this side and we're done installing our pages. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to work on is we're going to add some dimension to the cover. So I did reserve the second 12 by 12 and fussy cut out the this large image, and then I used lots of bits of chipboard on the back, and I prefer chipboard over foam because it's rigid. And I just find that when I have the chipboard on the back, I have much less issues with it getting snagged on anything because it doesn't move around. So I just take chipboard that's left over from making my covers and then just trim it until it fits. But there's nothing wrong with foam if that's your preference. Now, when I did this, when I added the chipboard the other day, I also added a thick layer of glue on the beak just to, because I knew I wouldn't be able to get chipboard on it, just to make it a little bit stiffer and less likely to get stuck on anything. And now I'm going to actually just glue the tip of the beak down so that it's not lifted up and just looking to grab on anything that comes by. My hands are kind of dirty, so I'm going to use my tweezers to hold it in place until it glues, until it catches. Okay. So the head has chipboard behind it, but the beak does not. And so I fussy cut that out, and then I also inked the edges to just make it blend in a little bit better. So I'm really liking the way that looks. I'm gonna set this aside for a few minutes, make sure that's completely dry, and then I am going to figure out how else we're going to embellish the cover. And in the meantime, I'm also going to do some housekeeping. So I'll be back shortly.